Behind closed doors, the secret battle that took Menglong away. Behind the glow of fame and the thunderous applause that followed his every move, Menglong carried a silence that the world never heard, a silence that whispered louder than his songs and smiled through the pain he couldn't share. To millions, he was the image of charm and grace, a man who seemed to have mastered the art of happiness. But behind closed doors, when the cameras dimmed and the world stopped watching, he was just another soul fighting to stay alive beneath the weight of everything he was expected to be. It's easy to love someone when they're shining. It's harder to see the cracks in their light. Menglong's story was one written in both melody and melancholy. Every note he sang, every scene he acted in, carried a piece of him, a reflection of a man who gave everything to his art, yet had so little left for himself. He had learned to hide his pain with perfection, turning exhaustion into elegance, heartbreak into performance. But as his fame grew brighter, his private world grew darker, until even he could no longer tell the difference between pretending to be okay and truly being okay. Friends would later recall how he was always present but distant. He would sit quietly in a crowded room, smiling when people laughed, nodding when spoken to, yet his eyes often drifted away, lost in a place no one could reach. The industry praised his discipline, his calm demeanor, his professionalism, but few realized those traits came from the walls he built around his heart. He was tired of being strong, tired of being perfect, tired of carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. He wanted, just once, to be seen for who he really was, a human being who could break, too. The pressure began subtly, as it always does. One missed call, one sleepless night, one fake smile at a time. He would tell himself it was fine, that everyone in his position felt this way. But fame has a cruel way of isolating those it crowns. Every compliment came with a comparison. Every success came with a shadow of fear. What if he couldn't live up to it next time? What if the world moved on? What if they loved the image more than the man? There were nights when he'd stare at his reflection in the mirror, unsure of who looked back at him. The smile he wore on stage no longer felt like his own. The words he spoke in interviews sounded rehearsed, hollow. Behind the charisma was a quiet despair that grew stronger with every performance. The applause was thunderous, but when it ended, so did his sense of purpose. The loneliness that followed was unbearable. Those close to him would sometimes find traces of his sadness in small things, a song lyric scribbled on a napkin, a message unsent, a voice recording left unfinished. He spoke often about peace, about wanting to rest his heart, but no one took it seriously. To them, it was just poetic expression. To him, it was a cry for help disguised as art. He wasn't trying to dramatize his pain. He was trying to survive it. He loved deeply, though he rarely showed it. There was someone once, a person who brought light into his life for a while. But even love, the purest kind, couldn't compete with the storm inside him. He feared being a burden. He feared being misunderstood. And so he pushed people away gently, quietly, as if saving them from himself. In the end, his greatest act of love was distance. Those who saw him in his final weeks said he was quieter than usual, though still kind and composed. He gave compliments, thanked everyone, and smiled through the exhaustion that lined his face. It was as if he was saying goodbye without words. The night before he was gone, he stayed up late, pacing his room, the city lights flickering across his window like fading stars. He wrote in his journal, his handwriting unsteady, "I wish they knew how heavy it is to always be okay." When news of his death broke, the world shattered. Fans flooded social media with disbelief and heartbreak. Tributes poured in, photos, videos, letters, each one echoing the same confusion. How could someone who gave so much joy be in so much pain? But that's the tragedy of invisible battles. You never see them until they win. Behind every smiling photo was a story no one asked about. Behind every flawless performance was a sleepless night. Behind every "I'm fine" was a man who desperately wanted someone to see through it. The entertainment industry mourned him as a loss to art, but those who truly knew him mourned him as a soul who never found the peace he deserved. He had once said in an interview, "Sometimes silence says everything." At the time, fans took it as a poetic quote, but now it feels like a haunting prophecy. Silence was his companion, his shield, and ultimately his escape. He carried his pain so gracefully that no one saw it killing him. He was too gentle for a world that demands strength, too sincere for an industry that feeds on masks. His room, after he was gone, told the story better than any interview could. A half-finished song lay on his desk, its chorus unreadable under smudged ink. His phone was filled with unsent messages, apologies, reassurances, fragments of thoughts. There was no dramatic goodbye, no final statement, just quiet acceptance. He didn't want to make the world sad. He simply wanted the noise in his mind to stop. But death didn't silence his story. If anything, it made the world listen for the first time. People began to talk about mental health in entertainment, about the loneliness that follows fame, about the fragile humanity behind the perfect smiles. They began to understand that success doesn't cure sadness, and applause doesn't drown pain. His passing became a mirror that reflected a truth too many ignore. Even the brightest stars burn out in silence. And yet, there's something achingly beautiful about how he is remembered. Not for his end, but for his heart, the way he loved, the way he inspired, the way he kept going even when it hurt. His fans still play his songs, not just because they're beautiful, but because they feel like confessions, pieces of his soul left behind for those willing to listen. His voice, gentle and haunting, reminds them that vulnerability is not weakness. It's what makes us human. In the end, Menglong's story isn't just about loss. It's about the unseen war between light and shadow, between fame and freedom, between who we are and who the world wants us to be. It's about every person who has ever smiled to hide a tear, who has ever said, "I'm fine," while breaking inside. His death is a tragedy, but his life, the way he lived, loved, and gave, remains a testament to courage. He may be gone, but his silence continues to speak. It speaks for those who feel unheard, unseen, and misunderstood. It whispers through his music, through every lyric and line, reminding the world that even the strongest souls need softness, that even the happiest faces can hide pain. His legacy is not just art, it's awareness. His absence is not just sorrow, it's a message. Behind closed doors, Menglong fought a battle no one could see. He lost that fight, but in doing so, he opened the world's eyes. Perhaps that's his final gift, to make us listen, to make us care, and to remind us that even behind the brightest smiles, someone might be silently asking for help. And so, the world remembers him, not as the man who left too soon, but as the man who taught us that behind every curtain, behind every door, and behind every "I'm okay," there might be a story waiting. The night before the world lost Menglong, the city was alive with neon lights and soft rain. The streets reflected his last moments in fragments, blurred lights, echoing footsteps, and the hush of a man walking through a world that no longer felt like home. In his apartment, the sound of rain tapping against the glass blended with the hum of silence that had long become his companion. He sat by the window, still dressed in the clothes he wore from his last rehearsal, a faint trace of makeup still on his skin, the kind of detail that said he had planned to rest, but not like this. His phone buzzed repeatedly that night. Messages from friends, from his manager, from a woman whose name he never erased but stopped replying to. He read every message, but answered none. His fingers hovered over the keyboard several times, typing and deleting words he couldn't find the courage to send. The last message he drafted read, "I'm tired, but I'm okay. Don't worry." It was the same lie he had told the world countless times. Gentle, believable, fatal. His diary lay open beside him, the pages smeared with the ink of someone who had written too fast, too hard, as if trying to outrun his own thoughts. "It's not sadness," he wrote. "It's the emptiness after giving everything. I don't know what more I can offer. Those words carried the kind of exhaustion no sleep could cure. It wasn't the kind of tired that comes from working too much. It was the kind that comes from feeling too deeply. In the last few months of his life, people noticed subtle changes. He smiled less, spoke softer, avoided eye contact longer. On set, he delivered his lines perfectly, but when the director yelled "cut," he seemed to fade. He no longer lingered for behind-the-scenes laughter or late-night dinners with the crew. Instead, he'd quietly slip away to his dressing room, sit in silence, and stare at the walls as if trying to remember why he was still here. One of his colleagues recalled finding him once, sitting on the studio floor with his head leaned back against the wall, eyes closed, earphones in. When asked what he was listening to, he replied with a faint smile, "Nothing, just silence." It was a haunting response, not because of what he said, but how he said it. Like silence was no longer an absence of sound, but the only thing he could still bear to hear. Fame had given you Menglong everything: recognition, luxury, love for millions. Yet it took from him the one thing he needed most: peace. Every time he walked into a crowd, he felt lonelier. Every smile he gave in public felt rehearsed. Every time fans shouted his name, it echoed through a hollow part of his soul that no applause could fill. He was everyone's favorite person, yet no one's person. In the privacy of his home, he lived a different life. The walls were lined with awards, but his bed was cold. His piano, once his comfort, was now covered in dust. He hadn't written a full song in months. The melodies he once played with passion now sat unfinished in his mind, tangled in memories he couldn't face. He often sat in the dark, fingers hovering over the keys, waiting for inspiration that never came. The silence between notes became his only music. There was a night not long before his passing when he met an old friend at a small cafe. They talked about old dreams, about simpler times before fame. For a brief moment, he laughed, really laughed, the kind that came from a place of nostalgia rather than joy. But when his friend said, "You've made it, Menglong. You've done what we always dreamed of," his smile faltered. He looked down at his coffee, steam rising between them like a veil, and said softly, "Maybe I made it too far away from myself." He wasn't broken. He was simply tired of pretending not to be. The truth was, Yu Menglong had mastered the art of being everything everyone needed him to be: the gentle idol, the perfect actor, the ideal friend. But in that process, he forgot how to be himself. The world demanded his smile, his voice, his time, and he gave it all willingly until there was nothing left for him. Behind closed doors, he would sit with that emptiness, unable to refill it. He often said he feared disappointing people. What no one knew was that he also feared waking up another day feeling the same way. On his final morning, he left his curtains open. Sunlight spilled across his room, catching on framed photos and notes stuck to his mirror. Among them was one that read, "You are enough." It was written in someone else's handwriting, a note left for him months ago. He had kept it, perhaps as a reminder, perhaps as a promise. But as the day went on, that promise slipped through his hands like sand. By the time the world found out, it was too late. The headlines screamed his name. The fans wept. The world mourned. But in the quiet corners of the internet, in fan pages, comment sections, and late-night posts, people began to piece together the puzzle of his pain. They revisited his lyrics, his interviews, his expressions. They noticed the sadness in his smile, the weariness in his words. Everything they once thought was performance now looked like confession. He was always telling us, one fan wrote. We just didn't hear him. And maybe that's the cruelest truth of all, that Yu Menglong's story wasn't a sudden tragedy, but a long, slow fade hidden behind applause. He didn't want to leave the world. He just wanted to stop hurting in it. He wanted to stop waking up to loneliness that fame couldn't fix, to stop fighting a battle that had no name, to stop pretending that being loved by millions could ever replace being understood by one. Now, when his songs play, there's a different kind of silence in between the notes, the kind that aches. His voice feels heavier, his lyrics more haunting. It's as if every word, carries the weight of what he couldn't say. And yet, through that pain, he remains alive in the hearts of those who listen, not as an idol, but as a reminder. A reminder that behind every smile, there might be a story untold. Behind every confident voice, there might be a cry for help. Behind every closed door, there might be a heart breaking quietly. Yu Menglong's legacy isn't just his art, it's his truth. The truth that the world often forgets, that even the brightest souls can dim in silence, and even the strongest hearts can grow tired of beating for everyone else. He may have left quietly, but his silence became an echo, one that continues to move through those who loved him, teaching them to look closer, listen deeper, and care more fiercely. For somewhere right now, behind another closed door, someone is fighting the same invisible battle he once fought. And maybe, just maybe, Yu Menglong's story will help them choose to stay,